Good afternoon. Good afternoon. And welcome to Mother's Day for Peace 2015. My name is Elizabeth Quiche, and I'm lucky enough to be the president of Agnes Scott College. And so it's my great pleasure to welcome all of you to Agnes Scott for this very special Mother's Day for Peace. And a very happy Mother's Day to all the mothers in the audience as well. You know, for 125 years, Agnes Scott has been dedicated to educating women to think deeply, live honorably, and engage the intellectual and social challenges of their time. And we are now launching this coming fall an exciting new initiative called Summit that will provide every student, regardless of her major, with a core curriculum focused on global learning and leadership development. And I mention those things because we're pretty excited about it. And I was just saying before that we're actually on track to enroll the largest first-year class in Agnes Scott history, so we're going strong. I mention all that because I salute the work of Julia Ward and of Ward all over the country, because today more than ever, we need women to step up and lead and to help us, whether in inner cities in the United States or around the world, to find peaceful and nonviolent solutions to the terrible challenges that are facing humanity. Today, more than ever, that is so critical. And so I'm so delighted to be able to partner with Ward. We're very proud of the fact that Ward's president, Becky Rafter, is an Agnes Scott alum, class of '97. And I'm also delighted by all the ways, and so grateful for all the ways in which Julia Ward is a wonderful community partner to Agnes Scott College. We've had several interns there over the years, 2, I believe, this year, and we've got another one starting this summer that provides just extraordinary experience for our students to connect with all of you and to connect with the important work that Ward is doing. And we're also so pleased and grateful that Ward has come, Ward representatives have come and spoken in classes and in many ways contributed to the education of our students. So we love that, and we look forward to expanding the partnership in the years to come. I also want to just salute all of you for the important work that you do every day to build a more peaceful and just and humane world. And now I'd like to please ask you to join me in welcoming to the stage Ayana Mustafa Reed, who will perform a song in honor of her mother, Julia Ward Board President Diane Valentin. Please join me in welcoming Ayana.
Look beneath his shirt today. There was a wound in his breast so deep and wide. And from the wound a lovely flower grew, from somewhere deep inside. He turned around to face his mother, to show her the wound in his breast that burned like a brand, and the sword that cut him open was the sword in his mother's hand. Every day another miracle. Only death would keep us apart. And to sacrifice my life for yours, I'd be the blood of a Lazarus heart. The blood of a Lazarus heart. His mother's sword was his protection, and the wound itself would give him power. The power to remake himself in the time of his darkest hour. Said the wound would give him courage and pain, the kind of pain that you can't hide. And from the wound a lovely flower grew, from somewhere deep inside. Every sacrifice a life for yours, I'd be the blood of a Lazarus heart. The blood of a Lazarus heart. Birds on the roof of my mother's house, no stones to chase them away. Birds on the roof of my mother's house, and they'll sit on my home someday. They fly out the window, they fly out the door. Where did she get the strength to fight them anymore? She counts all her children as a shield against her pain, and lifts her eyes to the sky like a flower to the rain. And every day another miracle. Only death would keep us apart. And to sacrifice a life for yours, I'd be the blood of a Lazarus heart. The blood of a Lazarus heart. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ayanna. That was beautiful. You did a great rendition of that song. And thank you for your remarks, President Keach. We're so glad you could be with us, and we're so proud of Agnes Scott students and our partnership with you all. So, good evening, good afternoon. It is really eveningful in here with all the darkness. So, my name is Becky Rafter. I'm the Executive Director of Julia Ward. And before we start our program, well, this is the program, but before we get to the meat of the program, I'm going to thrill everyone with a PowerPoint presentation. So basically, we're going to all be sharing my iPad this evening, so this is exciting. The presentation I'm about to share with you, I have modified it for myself, but it was created by an Agnes Scott student, a spring intern from Agnes Scott, Andy Sweetman. And then she presented it at an event at Spelman College with one of our spring interns from Spelman, Marissa Daniels, on the Global Day of Action Against Military Spending. So I'm really proud to share this with you guys. They did a great job. This past year at Julia Ward, we have explored what the root causes are of systemic and environmental violence. From real State of the Union to our race dialogues, from classroom discussions to coalition actions, we've asked you what you thought about violence. And here are some of the things that you all shared. Racism, direct and implicit bias, internalized, institutionalized, and systematized through policies and budgets and regulations, false truths portrayed in the media, a lack of government-sponsored models to effectively respond to personal and collective violence, poverty and the accompanying beliefs that poor people are not equal to middle-class people, who are not equal to wealthy people, the belief that women are not equal to men, that undocumented people are not equal to U.S. citizens, that people from other countries, especially developing countries, and their cultures are not equal to people from the U.S. and Western culture, and that transgender individuals are not equal to cisgender people, and that elders and youth are not respected. The list goes on and on. These beliefs cause acts of violence and also fear and insecurity due to their false notion of superiority, power, and control. As Jay Bookman taught us in The Real State of the Union, that fear is destructive in nature. People are afraid of change. People in positions of power use fear as a commodity, something that could be generated and transformed into profit and power. Politicians know that frightened people are easily manipulated. When you're afraid, you do one thing: shore up your stuff. That's all quotes from Jay. So the people, as a society, we manifest these signs and signals and symptoms of the problem of violence. Like a sick patient, it's part of this vicious cycle. But the symptoms as a name is really a misnomer, because the symptoms also breed intolerance, and the intolerance to the cures, and they reinforce the root causes. These symptoms, as you can see down at the bottom, oh wait, Jamie, don't put that part yet. Jamie is an awesome assistant. The symptoms, so we're down here at the bottom, are public policies that make it okay to be violent against people, to racially profile people, policies that maintain control over access to power and the levers to make change. So, for instance, gutting of the Voting Rights Act, passing of Citizens United, allowing unlimited money in politics, policies that protect dirty industry like nuclear energy and nuclear weapons. Another symptom is the lawful allocation of public resources to egregiously high levels of Pentagon spending. These signs and symptoms lead to what? They lead to corresponding numbers of people incarcerated or criminalized, detained, deported, domestically violenced, police violenced, killed, military casualties, and veterans with illnesses. They lead to high levels of radiological contamination and other environmental pollutants. They lead to the fact that hundreds of thousands of eligible Georgians are not turning out to vote, that there aren't candidates that reflect voters' values except folks like Nan Orrock and Senator Vincent Fort and other awesome elected officials in the room that I haven't mentioned yet. Are there other ones? I got some good ones. Oh, and Senator Tavares from Ohio. We're going to hear from her more in a minute. And also that these symptoms also correspond to numbers of people who are not graduating from high school, people in poverty, who are hungry, who are homeless. These numbers are especially high in the South, especially high in communities of color, especially high for women, especially trans women, especially Black trans women. So what does all of this lead to? Pain and suffering. So tonight's salon focuses on one of these symptoms. It focuses on the Pentagon budget, as you're already aware. But many of these symptoms and root causes are tied together, and we can't take on one without looking at all of them. And so tonight's panel, I'm sorry, it's not a panel. I've been telling everybody all week, it's not a panel. It's a salon. Tonight's speaker salon is going to address these issues. And as you're listening to the speaker salon, I encourage you to consider this cycle of violence so that you can locate the responses within it, so that we can think about what are different ways to intervene in this system that are appropriate to the problems. Because we can intervene in this system in anywhere, and we can knock it all off. As a capitalist society, we put our money where our mouth is. We invest in things that we value. I invest in a car that runs. I like organic food. I got my mom a Mother's Day present. Made a gift to Julia Ward. I like to give cash to people that are homeless. These are just things that I value, and this is where I invest my money. As a society, our federal budget shows where we collectively value things. According to our current federal budget, our society seems to believe in violence as our main value. What do you guys think? So let's look at this budget. And I'm going to try to go really, really fast because we're a little off time. We're going to try to get y'all out of here at 5:30. You can see the federal budget's heavy prioritization in tools of violence over tools of peace. This is the proposed discretionary budget for 2016. As you mostly know, the president proposes a budget. It has to go through the House and the Senate for authorization. That sets the policy standards for what's going to be allocated and appropriated. And then they go to 12 separate committees to appropriate the funds or create laws that say you can spend this money. Right now, and then it goes to the president to become law. For 2016, President Obama allocated $625 billion in military spending. That's 54% of the discretionary budget. As an example, education was allocated 6% of the federal budget. That's a big difference. The House and Senate just agreed last week to include a total military spending somewhere around $612 billion. So let's get through some terms together. Mandatory spending is for programs that are not optional, that people pay into, like Social Security and Medicare. So we're not talking about the mandatory spending tonight. We're talking about discretionary spending. Discretionary spending is the parts that go through the appropriations process. Lastly, budget caps. It's important to know what's going on with budget caps. This is an overall federal limit on all line items in the federal budget to try to balance the budget over 10 years. They're going to try to cut $1.3 trillion out of this budget. And it's being done out of all levels, defense and domestic and foreign policy programs. And we're going to get to in a minute of how they're getting around that. So keep in mind that they're trying to cut these programs federally, and they're going to try, like food stamps, the SNAP program, they're going to try to move that to the states. Well, when you're in a state like Georgia that doesn't want to spend money on, also is trying to cut money into human programs, that's a problem. So, in addition, what's going on in Georgia right now is that they're considering raising the sales tax. And the sales tax affects people who have lower incomes, who need those services that are being cut. They're also considering lowering the income tax, which favors people with money. So, again, the money is sort of going away. So, if the money is not coming from the federal budget, it's not going to come from the state budget, where's the funding going to come from? Well, let's start with our new favorite friend, the OCO, the Overseas Contingency Operations Fund. This is otherwise known as the War Slush Fund. This was created it operates within the Department of Defense, and it was created to finance the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. Sometimes there's very little oversight over this fund, and it's not subjected to the budget caps I mentioned earlier. So while every other part of the budget is limited, including defense spending, the OCO is unlimited. So this is last year's budget. This graph shows a couple of things. The first thing that it shows is that President Obama's requested funding for the Pentagon is the highest level of baseline Pentagon spending that we've ever seen. That's the first thing to look at. The second thing is that, as you can see in 2015, the OCO fund was $64 billion. And the current resolution that the House and Senate agreed on last week includes a total of OCO spending to be $96 billion, which is a big increase from $64 billion because it doesn't have a cap. So the House and the Senate got a hold of the budget resolution and decided that President Obama actually had originally requested to go over the budget caps in the Department of Defense. I mean, if you think about it, it was a Republican control. The sequestration was Republican control in the first place. So he was like, let's increase these caps. Well, the Republicans who control the House and the Senate didn't want to go for that because they want to be able to say that they're being conservative and that they're balancing the budget. So they passed the resolution to keep the line items below the caps, but to increase the OCO fund significantly because they're wanting to move the spending into the OCO fund that they want to spend for defense. And they can do that. But unfortunately, education and other non-defense spending does not have a slush fund that you can move excess spending into if you have excess need, which we do. So here are some myths and fears about cutting funding from the defense. Many people are afraid of moving money out of defense, but these are fears because they're not reality. We're calling them myths because the fears are they're not based in reality. One main fear is that cutting the Pentagon budget will cost jobs. Well, first of all, as you can see, the military only creates about 11,000 jobs, but for example, education creates 26,000 jobs. Another fear is that cutting the budget will only hurt our nation's veterans by reducing their benefits. Well, as you can see from looking at the graph again, the next graph, veterans' benefits are in an entirely different spending category from the Pentagon. Sadly, there's only $70 billion, around the same amount as what's funded for education, for veterans' benefits. But it is separate from Department of Defense spending. It's there in the gray, the dark gray. Ooh. Can I have my light back? Or do I not need the light? I just like being in the light. Thanks. So another fear is that it's going to leave us vulnerable. Leave us vulnerable to other countries' attacks. But as you can see from this graph, U.S. spending equals that of the 9 largest military budgets in the world. So all of this spending in the Pentagon affects different people differently. Remember I was talking earlier about the root causes of violence and how people think of each other as less than. So Agnes Scott students, upon graduation, and other people graduating from college, here's some Agnes Scott students at graduation, pulled this from the internet. Some of the issues that are going to affect them are cuts to the following issues: Pell Grants, financial aid and scholarships, healthcare and Medicaid, childcare, job training, paid maternity leave, and pay equity in the workforce. So some other people who are affected more negatively than others by the severe Pentagon spending are people who live in areas that are affected by the nuclear contamination of our ever-growing nuclear weapons complex and nuclear energy complex, which is created to fuel the nuclear weapons complex. So, and the people who are largely affected by the Pentagon, and this does not include everybody, this is just 2 groups of people that we're working with Luan. Other groups of people who are affected are people, black and brown men of color, by a militarized police force. So as part of the OCO funding, you're allowed, and part of Department of Defense funding in general, if you use your weapons, or if you give your weapons to an ally, so if I give some weapons to Germany, then I can ask Congress for some more money to buy myself some new weapons. So part of the cycle of violence is that if I give my new allies, the police, some of my weapons, because we're deputizing them as military sergeants and as ICE enforcers, immigrations and customs officers, then we're giving them these weapons of war, and then we can order some more for ourselves. So militarization affects, of course, people of color, as we've seen, with Baltimore, with Ferguson, with North Charleston, New York City, Atlanta, all the counties around Atlanta. No one is immune to this violence. Providing police officers with more weapons only enables them to use more brutal force on civilians, especially civilians of color. It increases militarization. Increasing militarization makes things dangerous for law-abiding citizens. There are more and more cases of innocent civilians getting killed because police feel threatened. More militarization means that police will think that they're above the law, not meant to protect and enforce the law. And many officers who are committing crimes are going unpunished. And this goes against the constitutional right, and it increases the struggle for equity under the law. Just some local examples. I'm going to name, I'm not going to go through all of them, but the counties: Waycross, Cartersville, Doraville, these aren't county cities, Waycross, Cartersville, Doraville, Noonan, Clayton County, Cobb County. They're having any number of armored personnel carriers, M15 rifles, M14 rifles, M16s. These are semi-automatic rifles. These are warfare weaponry that we're equipping with our local police officers. So I want you all, again, to keep in mind this cycle of violence as we're listening to the speaker salon, as we understand the cycle here, and you know, be locating their responses somewhere wherever you see fit. And we're going to try to have time for question and answer, but that's not guaranteed. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our moderators and our speakers for the speaker salon. And they're going to sort of introduce themselves when they come on stage, but I'm going to go ahead and bring to the stage Maggie Martin with Iraq Veterans Against the War, and Juan Evans with the Racial Justice Action Centers. And they are this evening's co-moderators. So Juan and Maggie, go ahead and join us on stage. These two incredible people know about systemic or government-sponsored or state-sanctioned, or however you want to call it, violence, whether in the prison system, whether from the hands of the police, from the hands of the U.S. military, and policies that we're using overseas. And it's been great to get to know both of these freedom fighters and survivors from the system of violence that we're all maneuvering in, and sometimes can see and sometimes can't see. And so I just want to thank you all very much for the lives that you're leading and the bravery that you have been exhibiting, and for moderating this panel. And then the speakers this evening, we are only having 2 out of our 3 speakers because of an illness. And so I'd like to welcome to the stage Larry Korb and Senator Charlita Tavares. And what we're going to have you all do is check out their bios and your programs, and I'm sure you've seen them in the invitations and all the emails that we've been sending out. Between these 4 people on this stage, there is so much expertise, not only about the Pentagon budget, but about violence in general and the way that we are manifesting that violence in our society. As you know, Larry Korb has gone from being the Assistant Secretary of Defense under Reagan and controlling 70% of the Pentagon budget, and still carrying forth that expertise at the Center for American Progress. And Senator Tavares is a state senator out of Ohio. She's the president of National Wand, which is of course, everyone knows National Wand. How can you not know National Wand? We're the Georgia chapter of National Wand. And she was the first Black woman elected to the Columbus City Council in Ohio, and we're just very pleased to have all 4 of these people here to speak with us this evening, and I'm sure I've left out a million accolades and gratitudes, but thank you all for being here.
All right. Thanks, Becky. That was an amazing PowerPoint. It's always very, very, I'm a little nervous, but it's always great when we can have folks here and show them a little Southern hospitality when they are willing and open to have an organic conversation about what's really affecting America. So, with that being said, each of us has experienced personal transformation that have political size, us around issues of militarism, weapons, violence, and how the government shows up institutionally in our lives. Let us begin by sharing briefly your transition around the political thinking. We can start with you, Larry.
Head of the Senator. Hi. Thank you very much. It's great to be here. My wife, Lane Stone, has been a long time supporter and to make sure I get some friendly questions, I have my daughter, Julie List, and my 2 grandchildren, Kurt and Jane. Listening to Becky's thing about the defense budget, I think it's important to keep in mind that no matter how much you spend on defense, you could spend the whole federal budget, you can't buy perfect security. It's always about making choices because you can never completely forecast the future. And so no matter what amount you have, people say, yeah, but you don't have enough for this or you don't have enough for that. The next thing to keep in mind is that what they call sequestration, or the Budget Control Act, basically froze defense spending at roughly the base budget about $500 billion. Now, that number is much higher than normally has occurred after wars. For example, this is the 40th anniversary of the fall of Saigon. And after Vietnam, the defense budget under Richard Nixon, in today's dollars, on controlling for inflation, was about $350 billion. So when people say, oh, we've calmed down like this before, look at the problems we've had. And remember, this was at the height of the Cold War. You still had the Soviet Union. The next thing, and Becky's slides pointed it out, even with the Budget Control Act, which it says you have sequestration if you don't conform. And again, that's important. Everybody says, well, sequestration is cutting the budget. No, sequestration comes in if you don't conform to the law. Basically, the Pentagon in fiscal years 13, 14, and then, 14 and 15, and then you have 16 coming up here, have gotten around it. And we've gotten around it in two ways. The Congress has raised the ceiling a couple of times for them. And number two, they've used the war funding budget they call the overseas contingency operations. Now, if you go back and you take a look, Korea, Vietnam, whenever we got involved in a war, once we got going, you had one budget. But the Bush administration kept it separate, and the Obama administration, and basically it has become, be very blunt, a slush fund, that you could put things in there that normally belong in the regular budget that have nothing to do with the wars in Afghanistan or Iraq. And last year we calculated there was about $20 billion in there. This year, the Obama administration had another 25, and then Congress put, another 40. So basically, the number is not low, and as the view graph pointed out here, it's more really than the rest of the world combined, all the significant nations. I mean, you hear about, China and Russia. Well, look at them. If you remember that graph, they were nowhere close to where, to where we are. Now, given where we are in terms of when people say, okay, well, fine, what do you want to cut? Well, the big thing we ought to take a look at right now, President Obama did want to do it, but the bureaucracy and the Congress has kept him from doing it, is nuclear weapons. We're on the threshold now of modernizing the triad, the land-based missiles, the bombers, and the submarine-launched ballistic missiles. If we go ahead and modernize them, under the law, the Congress says you have to keep what we call the New START levels of roughly 1,550 deployed weapons and about 5,000 total. It will cost over the next 30 years about $1 trillion. And the question is, why do you still need 1,550 nuclear weapons? Now, I know a lot of you are probably not enthusiastic supporters of President Reagan, but basically he hated them, and he tried to get rid of them all at Reykjavik with Prime Minister, then Secretary Gorbachev of the Soviet Union. He tried to get rid of them all. And so when people say, well, you still need to keep these, this is something that, we shouldn't do, and I know the president doesn't want to do, but he doesn't get the support. I came down here when the New START agreement was before the Senate. I was asked to come down by some group to talk to several of your representatives here. And we had a round table out at Georgia State to lay the issues, because there was a lot of doubt about whether we should do that. So that's one area that you can really take a look at. And then the other is what we call the cost growth in weapon systems. According to the General Accounting Office, GAO, of the 85 programs that the Pentagon has currently there, the cost overruns have been $411 billion. And basically, nobody's held responsible for it. Okay, I haven't seen anybody get fired, for not running it right or anything. And of course, industry comes in and says, "We'll give it to you for this." And then halfway through, we said, "Oh, by the way, it's going to cost more." The F-35, keeps going up and up, and that's another $1 trillion program, the new Joint Strike Fighter. So again, people have to be held accountable. And the good thing is that if you cut the budget, they will be accountable, because they know they have to spend it. Let me conclude with this. People ask me, you're still a Republican? I said, yeah, I'm an Eisenhower Republican. And you know how he gave to the military? He said, I'm going to do all the things I need to do, like build the interstate highway system, for example, and you guys get the remainder. That's it. You're not getting any more. And, you know, they moaned and groaned and all that, but being who he was, they didn't get, get very far. And on his 100th birthday, you know, they had a celebration, and all of his family said his proudest accomplishment was the interstate highway system. And we certainly could use ours getting fixed up today.
First of all, I would just like to correct something that Becky shared. She said that I was the first African-American woman to serve on Columbus City Council. That's not correct. I'm the first African-American woman to serve in the state legislature from my county in Columbus, Franklin County. And I'm proud of that, but more importantly is that we're opening the doors for more women to serve in the Ohio General Assembly, and we've been able to do that. It's important. For me, as a state senator, what's most important when we look at the pie and the lack of money, the lack of resources going to education, going to human services, that's really what got me into the work that I'm doing with WAND. Unmet human need, that we are more interested in destroying people, facilities, countries, than we are in building up individuals, and most importantly, our children. Not ensuring that we have the money for education, ensuring that we have money for health care, for daycare, for all of those needs, not wants. I'm a legislator that focuses in on the needs of people, not the wants of businesses, not the wants of the military, but the needs of people. And Larry just shared one of the great needs in our country today. It's the infrastructure. Our infrastructure is crumbling, whether you're in Georgia, Ohio, California. We've got sinkholes, we've got cars being sucked up into holes, we've got water and sewer lines that are aged and falling apart. We've got consent decrees with most major cities of America, with the federal government, the EPA, because our water and sewer lines are not where they should be. So this is why I got involved with the work of the Women's Action for New Direction, WAND, and the great work that Nan Orak is doing with Will to build up women so that we can take our rightful places in the Congress, in the state legislatures, in city councils all across America, so that we can be the voice to demand that the people's needs are being met.
Maggie, I know that you started off in the military, and now you're fighting against war. Can you give us a little insight on that?
Yeah, thanks. If that's okay, Juan and I are going to participate in this conversation a little bit as well, but I was in the military from 2001 to 2006. And I joined as a young person shortly out of high school at 19 years old, kind of believing that the U.S. military was always on the right side of history, that we were trying to protect the freedom of people here in the U.S. and work for democracy abroad. But my experience showed me different, and the racism that I witnessed and the sexism that I experienced and what I saw done to the country of Iraq and the people of Iraq really started my process of questioning my participation in the war and leading me to want to do work to counter my participation and fight for peace and justice in the future. So I'm going to ask the next question. Senator, if you don't mind starting, what do you see as the relationship between the Pentagon budget and U.S. foreign policy, and the relationship between the Pentagon budget and our domestic policy, and what do you see as the kind of driving force?
Well, I believe the U.S. defense budget, Pentagon budget in particular, and our policies throughout the world is focused on war and the fear of other countries with the United States. When we build up, continue to build up our weapons of mass and total destruction, nuclear weapons that we don't need, certainly are spending money on weapons that aren't wanted, obsolete weapons, and weapons that the military has said that they do not want, shows countries around the world that we just want to have the most. We want to have the most weapons. We want to have the diversity of weapons. And when you have weapons that are not stored in some cases properly, you have the added fear that they may get into the wrong hands. That's not only something that other countries are fearful of, but certainly those within the United States as well. As far as how this spending has an impact on our domestic policies, it's showing the people of America that we value not the veterans themselves, but we value the equipment and the need to have more, better, more destructive equipment than we need to have resources to take care of the veterans who are suffering here in America. It's also sharing with our young people that their education isn't necessary or isn't valued as much. I think Becky shared that how we spend our money, and if you look at your own checkbook, your own resources, how you spend your resources shares where you put your priorities, what means the most to you. How America spends her money shares where we place our priorities. We've got students, I'm sure here at Agnes Scott, at Spelman, at colleges all around the country, students that are leaving college with tremendous debt. I think the average in Ohio is $29,000, but we've got students with over $100,000 in debt because we're not prioritizing their education. So I think the domestic policy is showing all of America that we don't value the basic needs, a strong education system, primary, secondary, higher education, a strong infrastructure, protection of our environment, which is critically important if we're going to have healthy individuals, and certainly having the money for the healthcare needs of our citizens and our residents.
Going back, to Eisenhower, he recognized that you can't be strong in the world unless you're strong at home. And it's very interesting if you go back and look at that period. It's just, fascinating, because after the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, there was a panic in this country. Everybody, oh my goodness, bomber gaps and missile gaps, and all that. And what was Eisenhower's response? Passed the National Defense Education Act, which was the first time that the federal government really got involved in education. And that was the way to do it. In this struggle we have with these violent extremists, that we're dealing with now around the world, it's going to be a long-term struggle. The answer is not just going to be, obviously, there'll be some uses of force, but the real issue is going to be, can we prevail? Are we going to be strong enough to be able to do the things? And that's why it's so important. I travel around the world. People say, what's the greatest threat to the United States? I said, it's the 58,000 bridges that are about to fall down, when you do that. And in the same way, if our education system is not doing, what it should. On that chart there, it's very interesting. Two things are interesting, because as Becky pointed out, every time I get involved in this debate, they'll say, well, the veterans, you're going to, no, it's a separate budget. Okay, and by the way, when you go to war, your veterans budget's going to go up, and, I happen to think the Iraq War was a big mistake, but, all of the members of the Congress and the Senate, voted for it, but instead of raising taxes to pay for it, they cut them. And you're going to be paying the cost of that war for those veterans. I was in Vietnam, and a couple of years ago I was diagnosed, and they said, oh, that's Agent Orange, you can get benefits. Well, fortunately I have a good health care plan, but you're going to be paying for that for a long time. The other this goes back to Eisenhower, that was up in the chart, and they talked about the nuclear weapons development that's done in the Department of Energy. That doesn't count against the defense budget. But that's where, in fact, again, Eisenhower said, we don't want the guys using them, developing them. So when people say, oh, nuclear weapons are cheap, comparatively, you know, for the Pentagon, what their share, but a lot of it's in the Department of Energy. It's the biggest thing. If you saw the Iran negotiations, who do they have to bring in at the end? The Secretary of Energy, because he's the one who does, you know, and again, we forget that. And something else that doesn't show up there, the military retirement system had no trust fund until about 20 years ago, didn't have an accrual basis. The unfunded liability was transferred out of the Pentagon budget. That doesn't count. That's another $75 billion that you're paying for men and women who have served in the past. And you need to understand that when you take a person in and you send that man or woman to war, or you're going to be paying for a long time. And then the final thing is when sequestration or the Budget Control Act came in 2011, the Pentagon budget had got to levels, again, controlling for inflation, we hadn't seen since World War II. Bigger than Korea, bigger than Vietnam. So when they were frozen, the other agencies had not grown that, you know, that much. So they were in a much better position, you know. And people say, well, you've cut the Pentagon budget $1 trillion. No, what you've done is you cut the projected growth in the budget, you know. And so I think, you know, when you look at all of these things, you can say, you know, where do we want to, you know, put our marginal dollars? Put them into things here at home. You're fine with the military that you have.
Well, we want to bring in stateside policing into our conversation. And so the next question is, at what point in our society did we first start to see that the police were being outfitted and trained with military-grade techniques, gear, and mindset?
No, what happened here, go ahead, you want to? No, what happened here is, and we used to come under my office, called the Defense Surplus Property Disposal Unit. So when the Defense Department doesn't need something like the, you know, what they call the AMRAPs that guarded against the improvised explosive devices and stuff, it's old, you basically have to offer it to other federal agencies, and then to state and local governments. And so the states and local government, oh my goodness, let's get those things, you know, and you saw the pictures up there, and that's where your political leaders should have said, wait a second, I know it's free, but is this really what you want to do, or are you create more harm than good? So they gobbled it up, and basically then they could cut their budgets, you know, and it looked like a win-win until you saw, you know, what it is. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, this was built to fight very sophisticated enemies, not to deal with, you know, violence in the city.
For me, this is something that we all should be concerned about. In fact, it was part of a discussion that we had at the WAND board meeting in Massachusetts this weekend. How can we as elected officials stop the use of the military equipment, particularly when cities and towns and villages all across America are suffering with budget cuts? And most communities, your safety forces are your largest budget item. In the city of Columbus, Ohio is the capital of the state of Ohio. We have over 1 million people in the county. In the city itself, it's about 800,000 people. So it's a very large city. Our safety forces, that's police and fire, is 70%, almost 71% of our budget. That's huge. And so when you have cuts at the state level, because we're not getting what we need from the federal government for all of our health, human services, education issues, then cities all across America are cutting their budgets. And when you have 71% of your budget being your safety forces, then they're going to look for other ways to get the equipment they think they need. Not that they need, but they think they need or that they want. And I'm of the mind that we've got to put controls on. And so we had that discussion at our WAND board meeting this weekend, and I had a colleague from Wisconsin who had talked about a resolution she had offered to put controls on what was accepted and how it was being used. And I think that's what we've got to do all across America, that we've got to demand that if our safety forces, our police departments, our sheriff departments are accepting equipment, we need to have the controls in place on how it's used, when it's used, and certainly should not be used against our own people.
This is a really good conversation, and I am like supposed to be keeping track of the time, and I'm just in awe. Yes, loving the information. We want to jump on Homeland Security a little bit. It seems we've been put at a higher alert. What does this mean, and who exactly is being protected, and what is being protected?
Well, if you're in government, basically, it's better to be safe than sorry. So if you say, I'm going to raise the threat level, okay, and nothing happens, nobody will care. But if you say, no, I don't think we ought to. And I think the reason it has been raised is that you have a lot of, unfortunately, young men and young women in this country and other countries around the world who are being, no other words used, seduced with social media with these groups around the world. And they're saying, well, look, the United States is fighting ISIL over there. You've got to do something here to stop it. And, you ought to go into, this area or that area. I mean, for example, one of the things they said on the social media, you ought to go after military bases, and they published a whole list of the names of military people and their families on the net that you could go after. So I think that's why they're doing it. And then you get into, like we had down in Dallas, you get to the whole questions about free speech and them doing the cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad, and people reacting against that, even if they're not part of ISIL or anything. And I think what we need to understand, and President Obama, I think, has really tried to frame it this way, but it keeps getting lost with other people. This is not a struggle between the West and the Muslim world. It's a struggle between civilized society and people who want to resort to violence and use, religion. Some use all kinds of justifications. But it's interesting. I did some checking when I was involved in a debate on this one time. You know what? Most of what we call terrorist or violent actions in the United States are caused by neo-Nazis. Okay? You still have these hate groups all over the country, And, Hitler's been dead for 70 years. So I think, that's a problem we need to deal with, and why are people turning to that and to stop that? But no, I think that's the reason that they did, because of what has happened lately.
I guess the other issue that we all should be concerned about is as Larry said, are homegrown terrorists against people who are different, people who subscribe to another kind of religion, people who don't speak the same language, people who are immigrants, people who have different sexual orientation, women. There's still great violence against women every day in America. We've got human trafficking. Homeland Security, if we're really talking security, should be looking and addressing some of the issues like that, rather than making us fearful of each other. I've gotten very, very dismayed about how we are separating ourselves as public officials from our people. I don't know about you, but my state capitol building is becoming a place where it's no longer the people's house. It's supposed to belong to the people of Ohio. But you have to have security badges. You can't go into certain places within the building unless you have those security badges. And I don't want to live in a country where I have to be afraid of everyone that is supposed to be my constituent that I'm serving. Yes, we should protect ourselves, but not so we're so fearful of everyone, and especially people who may not look, sound, act just like us. And I think what we're saying to our young people, and young people who are in poverty, young people who can't find a job, young people who see that they're not valued as much as their brothers and sisters from another race, we're showing them that they aren't valued. And when people feel like they're not wanted and that they're not as good as, sometimes that turns to anger. And anger breeds all kinds of ugliness, no matter who we are. So I think, again, going back to domestic issues and focusing in on the sexism, the racism, the xenophobia, all of the isms, and trying to address the needs of the people, we will give them less opportunity for anger and more interest in getting to know each other and getting to the respect that everyone deserves. But we can't be fearful of everyone walking down the street, because that's only going to lead to more violence. And particularly with the gun laws that we have on the books in many communities across the country, where it's okay to bring guns into a house of worship. It's okay to bring guns in to a school, and many of our children are killing each other and killing or maiming their family members simply because we're not responsible with the weapons that we bring into our home.
Well, I think we have time for one last question. Becky can let us know if we have more time. But I want to ask the two speakers, and Juan as well, what would bold peace and justice look like if it were to be institutionalized and if it were to be built into our budget?
Well, and you raise a good point, because, dollars are policy. I mean, you talk about, well, we want the capacity to do this. Well, if you haven't bought the equipment, you're not going to be able to do it. And I think what you want to do basically is go back to the first point we discussed, and it's nation building at home has got to be. As you well know, you've been in Iraq, and we're not good at nation building in other countries, okay, with different cultures and stuff like that. And that doesn't mean you don't go after your enemies, but nation building is something we need to do at home. And if you make that your priority, then your budget will, I think, come into line. And I'd like to see, I haven't seen any of the candidates in either party now, kind of talk about this, but I do think that that is something that we should focus on in the next election. Let's nation build at home, and then we will have peace and justice and all those things.
I certainly agree with Larry on that. If we take care of home first, then we can help others where there's a need, not just our want to go into nations because they may have some resources that they want, or because we don't like the way they have developed as a nation. I also think what it looks like is having more women at the seat of power. I think it's critically important, if we want a just society, that we have a society that reflects the populations we say we represent. We are, in my state, about 52% of the population. Women are about 52% of the population. I serve in the Senate, and out of 33 members, there are only 8 women. 4 on my side of the aisle, and 3 on the other side. They have 23 members, and 3 out of the 23 are women. On the Finance Committee, that's an important committee. If we're going to change the way we look at our checkbook, our state's checkbook, America's checkbook, we need women on the Finance Appropriations Committees. In my state, out of the 14 members on the Senate Finance Committee, there is 1 woman and 1 person of color. And it happens to be the same person, me. That is unconscionable, because I can't carry the perspective of every woman. I can't carry the perspective of every person of color out of the 14 members and vote on a budget that reflects the needs and the wants of the communities all across the state. So we need more women in Congress. We certainly would do well by having a woman as president, and we need more women like Nan Orrock at the seats of power in state legislatures all over the country.
For me, I'm going to make it really, really quick because I want to get in with the senator. But another question. So what bold peace would look like to me would be an end to institutionalized racism would be gone. And more community-based social services is where a lot of funding would go, along with education, and an end to not only mass incarceration, but also an end to mass criminalization too. I have 1 minute left, and I think I want the senator to take us out. I want to ask, what could we be doing, or what should we be doing to end racial profiling and state militarization, sorry about that, of police?
Well, I think two things. First of all, to end racial profiling, we need all of our law enforcement to reflect the populations that we serve. We certainly need our law enforcement to go through sensitivity training, but more importantly, cultural competence training, so that they can become proficient in understanding the people that they say they want to protect and serve. If you don't have respect for the people that you are to protect, you can't very well serve them. And certainly, again, it makes a difference when you have people from the various walks of life serving in our law enforcement. And then I'm a firm believer in civilian review boards. When there is deadly force or force that people believe is unjustified, that you have the people of that community sitting on panels representing the people of the community to review what has taken place. And then finally, we need to elect more people to office from all different backgrounds, at the local level, the state level, the federal level, to ensure that we have a government that is of, by, and for the people, all of the people, not just some of the people.
I'm going to take 30 seconds to say something. But sexual violence in the military needs to be handled, and Juan can play a big role in that, because the Congress will not take these things out of the chain of command until you do that. And then you're talking about tens of thousands of cases every year.
Thank you, Larry. Do we have 10 seconds to get Maggie input on the end of state militarization?
Geez, I wasn't prepared for that. I was just gonna turn it over, but I guess I think civilian review boards are really important. I think finding ways to encourage resistance and whistleblowers from within the police force. I know some people, are taking a strong stance against police, and coming from a place of being once in the military, I think we have a special understanding that good people join and make those decisions for the right reason, and then find themselves in a position that's against their morals. So I think, good police officers should speak out against those who are not doing their jobs. So, thank you very much to our excellent speakers, and again to Juan, and we're going to pass it over for the Mother's Day for Peace Awards.
And happy Mother's Day.
All right, let's have another round of applause for these incredible speakers and moderators. Maggie came all the way from Tennessee. Juan with Racial Justice Action Center and the SNAPCO came all the way, just was at the White House, and before that was in Seattle with Kwanzaa Hall and some other great people about their pre-arrest diversion program. Larry came all the way from DC and Sugar Hill, and Senator Tavares came all the way from Ohio. So I want to give a huge round of applause for these brilliant thinkers and people that have had really out-of-this-world experiences that are really able to inform this dialogue. The dialogue will continue. If people are interested, on July 11th, we're having a training to talk about these issues more specifically and in depth for several hours. So without further ado, we're going to present the Mother's Day for Peace Awards. Yay! And the presenters our last year's award honorees. So people who are receiving awards this year, go ahead and put Mother's Day for Peace on your calendar for next year, because you're going to be presenting some awards. So let's start with Diane Mathewitz.
Good afternoon. I didn't realize last year when I stood on the stage at Juan's annual Mother's Day event to receive the first Peace and Justice Award that it was a twofer honor. The first year, as Becky just said, you receive the award, and then the next year you have the privilege of giving it. And I have to say, I am much more enjoying and much more comfortable about this part of it. Before I say a few words about Dawn Gibson, this year's honoree, I wish to thank Juan for creating this annual award, a perhaps singular moment in the Atlanta progressive activist community to recognize the efforts of those who strive, oftentimes against the overwhelming torrent of pro-war national chauvinism of the politicians, corporate media, and moneyed interests. It is a tsunami of lies and chest-beating patriotism that is unleashed to convince the public that U.S. military aggression, imperialist interventions, shock and awe terrorism, drone warfare, sanctions, and racist and demagogic rhetoric all serves democracy and human liberation. The anti-war, anti-imperialist movement is often viciously attacked, or later, when proven right, publicly ignored or dismissed. U.S. history in general, and certainly in the most recent years, is one of endless war. From Yugoslavia, Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan, Yemen, Somalia, Libya, Syria, and Ukraine, to endless threats against Iran, the People's Republic of Korea, Cuba, Venezuela, and others. War and the threat of war is the new normal for the U.S. and its allies as they try to keep their failed system in place. The individuals and organizations that stand up to warmongering are truly, indeed, our heroes and sheroes. And that is why I am so pleased to present this award to Dawn Gibson. You can read in your program of her accomplishments. I will only add that, as Dawn reminded me just a few hours ago, that we first met at an event in support of the Palestinian struggle against Israeli occupation in 2009. Bringing the reality of the decades-long subjugation and oppression of the Palestinian people by the US-backed Zionist state of Israel is one of Dawn's most passionately held principles. We have worked together on countless programs, campaigns, and protests as leaders of MIAG, Movement to End Israeli Apartheid Georgia, the Georgia Peace and Justice Coalition, and many other groups, all designed to educate and mobilize people to make the connection between the profit system that wages war and economic domination abroad with the policies of racism, sexism, homophobia, and anti-worker bias that deepens poverty, environmental degradation, and social inequality at home. As an African-American feminist and revolutionary, she has brought an inclusive and critical perspective to this work. Dawn has been and is a significant public and organizational voice in the struggle for peace and justice at home and abroad. Please join me in presenting the 2015 Peace and Justice Award to Dawn Gibson.
I get a podium this year. Thank you. It's easier to hide behind.
Thank you so much, Georgia Women's Actions for New Directions, for honoring me with this award. I appreciate you lifting me up in the work that I try to do anyway. I have to say that, you know, when I was listening to Diane introduce me, I was just like, who's that? But, you know, I also credit a lot of my analysis, you know, a lot of my drive from women like Diane Mathowitz, from women and men that are present here today. So I'm not alone in this work. I have a lot to learn. I have a lot to share with other people. And thank you so much for honoring me today. Oh, and smash capitalism. Thank you.
Our next presentation will be done by Diane Valentin, Georgia WAND President, and National WAND C4 Vice President.
Greetings, everyone. I bid you peace and blessings. I would like to welcome you to our annual event. You can read about Nan, you know, the blurb in the bio in the program. But for me, I want to say that Nan is my friend. She is a warrior woman who I am willing to go into battle with. I stand shoulder to shoulder with Nan a number of times, and she is the kind of warrior woman, because I can't think of another thing to call her, who I know I can depend on, who I know will take the issue and make sure that it serves the people. And that's another thing I wanted to make sure I said. Nan has a district that she represents, who elects her. But everyone that I know who lives in this metro area thinks Nan is their representative. It doesn't matter where they live. Everybody thinks Nan is their senator. So I'm like, yes, that's what I'm talking about, because she serves the people. And whatever she works hard at, she makes sure it serves all of Georgia, not just the people who are lucky enough to live in her district. But I want you to know that I love her, I respect her, and I stand with her on many occasions, and I will continue to do so. And I would like to present this award for faithful service, because that is exactly what she does.
Diane Valentin, thank you so much for your generous remarks. And I'm very honored to be recognized today along with my fellow honorees, great women all, and to be recognized by WAND, a group that I've worked in at the national level and here in Georgia since the early 90s, when I was recruited into WAND by Bobby Wren Banks and other colleagues of hers in the WAND chapter here, this very WAND chapter that grows and thrives today and surges forward under Becky Rafter's leadership and the great board that she's put together and staff. So I'm honored to be with you. Loved the panel. It's my sister Charlita and Larry and the moderators. I thought that it was edifying, and I'm glad to see it was being videoed, because that's something that we can share through social media and spread the word about the incredible battles that we have before us today, battling for some sanity in our federal budgeting, battling against extremism that is on the rise in this country, as we've seen it on the rise around the world. I'm privileged to have as my day job, in addition to being a senator, the wonderful work of organizing fellow women legislators across the country to lift our voices together against the bloated military budget and as you heard from Larry, $30-year trillion-dollar expense of keeping up this massive, dangerous nuclear weapons armaments that we have. And so I feel very privileged with the work I do both in the Senate and organizing fellow legislators to be voices, women coming to the tables of power. Wand has lifted me up and given me so many opportunities, just like the people that first boosted me and asked me to run. I feel very rooted in the communities that send me to the state Senate and bolstered and held aloft to keep on fighting by understanding that we're all part of the mighty historic stream of justice that runs through history, and we all step in and take our piece of the action, fighting for peace, and others will come beyond us and continue that fight. Don't give up, as John Lewis says. Don't give out. Don't give in. Hold the banner high. Speak truth to power. And we do it together as a community of women and men in love and in hope and knowing that there must be a better day and a better way. Thank you for honoring me today.
I get to do that. I get to scream when I want to. The next presenter is C.C. Anderson, Georgia Wand board member.
Good afternoon, good evening, depending on what time zone you're in. I'm here to present the Ed Arnold Award, Environmental Justice Award. And can you fix this on the back? Thank you. Doesn't like me. Thanks. Ed Arnold was the director of Atlanta chapter of Physicians and Social Responsibility and a very dear friend to Georgia Wand members for over 25 years. Ed, it seems, was always by our side, working hard with our colleagues as an educator, collaborator, and bridge builder. He also was a tender-hearted diplomat. Ed was passionate, dedicated for the fairness and justice, and he was fascinated by the mysteries and ironies of life. When he died of leukemia in June 2008, the peace and justice and environmental activist communities felt lost, way beyond words. Ed was very comfortable in Washington, D.C., navigating the halls, walking back and forth, also in North Carolina, where he and his companion, Betsy Rivard, raise your hand, Betsy, he's down front, loved to hike. By instituting the first Ed Arnold Environmental Justice Award, members of the Georgia Wand Nuclear Committee agreed that this award should be presented to a person or a group of people working collaboratively in Georgia to preserve the safety and the health of plants, of persons, exemplifying Ed's commitment and dedication to advocate for justice and strong environmental policies that protect the most valuable. And by your surprise, I was awarded this award last year. Thank you so much. And I want to present this award to Makara Rumley. She is a bridge builder. I met her a couple of months back, and I thought this girl was a powerful young woman, and I needed to get to know her. And so we talked, and I was telling her what we were doing in Shell Bluff and Waynesboro and Georgia and South Carolina. And little did I know that she was going to be receiving this award. She has just got promoted into a new position, And as I call her up, she would tell you specifically what she does, and she's going to be a friend of Georgia Wand's because we have an advocate in there. Come on up, Makai. Give her a hand if she can. You can read her bio in our...
Thank you, C.C. Anderson. Thank you, Georgia Wand Board of Directors, for this prestigious award. Thank you to my husband, Robert, and my children, Chase, Robert, and River, and my sister, Senielle, for being here today to support me. Environmental justice. Very passionate about environmental justice. I started off at Spelman College, a math engineering major, and I took one environmental justice class by Dr. Robert Bullard at Clark Atlanta University and immediately changed my major to sociology, political science. I was transformed at that time, and what resonated with me the most was making sure to give communities and citizens of this country a voice who were being exposed to pollution that caused pain and suffering in their life, that they were being denied, in my opinion, basic human rights. And you may think, well, what does that mean? What that means is, you fish in a river because you can't buy all of the groceries that you need at the grocery store. You can't afford to. And so you fish for additional sustenance, and that fish has mercury in it. And you unknowingly are feeding it to your children. That's diminishing the very brain capacity to do well in school, to get a job, to earn a living, to be a productive member of the society. And it starts from inception. And sometimes it starts in the womb, being exposed to living close to a nuclear plant and wanting to be able to be involved in that decision-making process and having the courage to speak up and to say what is not right, even when people are not listening to you, to have that tenacity and to have that endurance to keep raising your voice and to keep speaking up. I was able to touch communities within this state by using legal tools to give them in order to lobby zoning commissioners to not approve certain zoning permits, to reduce their exposure to pollution, just to get our politicians and our policymakers to make the right decision to stop this cycle of overburdened communities. And now I have the opportunity to take that hands-on experience with grassroots communities and use it from a government perspective. Now I am the senior advisor to our Region 4 administrator here in the state of Georgia on community engagement. So every community within our region, that includes, they probably don't know exactly who they got to this position, but we're talking about North Carolina, South Carolina, Alabama, Florida, Louisiana, Kentucky, Georgia, and seven federally recognized Native American tribes. I am overseeing the work that the federal government is doing in those communities, not just going in to address pollution, but to bring a holistic toolbox to address the economy, health, transportation, everything that really just combines that whole cycle that Becky had up earlier. And hopefully I can be an accretive piece to solving some of these challenges that we all care about. Again, thank you. I start to get going and I gotta get myself off track. But thank you again for this award. It really is an honor. And I enjoy speaking with all of you. Look forward to that after this. Thank you.
So unless Helen has arrived, I have the honor and the privilege to present our final evening's award to one of my favorite people. This is the Women's Political Empowerment Award. This award is presented to a person committed to working collaboratively to engage in the critical issues of our time and to broaden public awareness and action around policies in the South, especially those affecting women and vulnerable communities. It is given to individuals who put these ideals into action through get out the vote work, lobbying, making their voices heard through the media, rallying and marching in the streets, and direct action and civil disobedience. This work is the bedrock of building the movement for liberation in Georgia, and I am pleased to present this award. I'm going to say a few things about her, but I want her to come on up here first. I'm pleased to present this award to Krista Brewer. Krista is a journalist. Let's give it up for Krista. Where is Krista? So Krista is a journalist by trade. She has a long history with Georgia Wand. She was the board president for a number of years. She worked alongside Bobby Paul. Bobby Paul, are you in here? Bobby Paul, we need you up here too in a minute. This organization that started as a volunteer-run organization built into this robust statewide group. Krista Brewer is one of those faces of that. She came into the office and worked alongside Bobby and the staff every day. Diane's doing that with me right now. We really appreciate the work of you all as board leaders. So look, now Krista moved on from Georgia Wand. Before she left, she helped start the We Count voter engagement program, which is still thriving. And then she was like, you know what we need around here? We need a state table. She had heard about this, how it's happening nationally, a couple other places. You know, things come to the South last, but they don't realize that we're doing all this stuff first, right? And so she was like, we need to have the state civic engagement table where organizations that are doing get out the vote work and voter registration efforts can collaborate so we're not duplicating efforts and how we maximize our scarce resources. So she comes up with this idea. She runs around, gets everybody rallied behind her, and she launches this. What's the budget for that thing right now? It's got a big budget. It's got a bunch of groups. A bunch of the groups here are here tonight. So what the thing is with Krista that I've realized is that whatever she puts her hands on and gets involved in is going to thrive. And she will sit down with me all the time providing advice and strategy and have you thought about this and have you thought about that? And I've noticed that when I don't take her advice, within 4 to 6 months, I realized I should have taken that advice. So I've learned that as much as I possibly have the capacity to do to take her advice. So Krista, it is such an honor and pleasure to present you with this award that I'm going to give it to you now. And it's got some stuff written on it, and we just appreciate you so much. You're such a warrior, you're such a leader, you're such a good friend. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, Becky, and thanks to the board of Georgia Wand and to all of you for this, for honoring me today. Becky actually said a few things that I was planning to say, but I also wanted to give a shout out to my sweet and very supportive husband, Gary Flack, and my youngest daughter, who surprised me today on Mother's Day. She came into town, and so it's made it a very special Mother's Day for me. And my whole family was very supportive of me working 24/7, basically, for Georgia Wand. And it is true that I came into the board leadership or onto the board the same year that Bobby came in as executive director. And so together, she and I and many of you in this room worked so hard to lift up the voices of women, to build up our chapter, and to advance so many of our progressive values that we hold so dear. And the thing about Georgia Wand is that the beginning of our motto, our basic principles, is to involve women in the political process. So in 2004, I said, oh, that means that we need to register voters. We need to do phone banking. we need to drive people to the polls. So Bobby and I and many of you in this room started this fairly massive effort to do that work, and we partnered with a large number with other organizations, including the Georgia People's Agenda and Labor, Planned Parenthood, the League of Women Voters, and we worked in 2004, 2006, 2008, and it was a lot of fun. And I found my real political sea legs in this civic engagement space. And as Becky said, I started learning about these collaborations of groups that have as part of their mission civic engagement, and decided that we needed to form something like this in Georgia. They're generically called state tables, and we did form, as I rolled off the board of Georgia Wand, we formed Pro-Georgia, and Georgia Wand has been an initial member and a key member of the Pro-Georgia collaboration. I think that League of Women Voters is in the house today with Kelly Persons, and Planned Parenthood, I think I saw somebody from Planned Parenthood, and so, and a number of other key organizations in this state have come together to work more strategically and more smartly, and to work with 21st century tools and hard data to figure out ways to get more people to the polls, but specifically people that are going to vote for progressive values. Pro-Georgia is nonpartisan, but it is a progressive organization that is trying to advance a progressive agenda in our state to improve the lives of women, of children, to improve our environment. What I've realized as I've been involved in this activist space really my whole adult life is that we can have, in a heavily conservative state like Georgia, we can work hard and have small victories on progressive agendas. But until we change the makeup of our elected officials, and specifically until we elect more women, we are not going to see the kind of progressive agendas, progressive policies, and the kind of state that we really want to live in, that's going to be serving our needs. I believe deeply in democracy, so I thought what we have to do is participate in this democratic process as robustly as possible. And so that's kind of the driving force. I so value the friendships and the commitment of so many of you in this room to these same values, and I am honored to have this Political Empowerment Award. So thank you all very much.